The NAWCQ is in less than 2 weeks, and I'm currently training so I can do my best to win the event. I previously started testing with Pure Yugioh because that was the deck I had last played competitive Yu-Gi-Oh with, having taken the past couple of months off. And after combing through the rest of the playable decks, I pretty much came to the conclusion that we have to play either a Mitsurugi variant or a Malice deck to have the most optimized chances of winning. We started off considering Malice, which is a deck that is extremely powerful and makes basically unbreakable end boards. The deck also plays a bunch of extenders and has room for a lot of non-engine. One of the key selling points of the deck is the fact that you're able to play 3 copies of Dominus Impulse without any drawbacks. With Malice being all dark, there's basically nothing that conflicted. But one issue that I had with the deck was the fact that it only had about 8 1-card starters, which meant there was still a possibility of bricking or having consistency issues where you only see one starter that gets stopped by one single hand trap. Okay, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit. They don't actually brick as much as you would expect because there are a ton of extenders in the deck. And even by opening these extenders without any of the names, you can still bridge easily into the Malice engine. But I guess I played a couple of games, had some anecdotal experience, and now I'm making excuses for why I don't want to play the deck. Another thing that I didn't like about the deck was that post-side, Lancia really shuts down a lot of what you can do. Now, of course, any self-respecting Malice player could still play through Lancia and set up a board with a couple of interruptions, especially if you side deck copies of AI Michu, which allow you to dig for your Ignister engine and still link climb despite being under Lancia. But I found that the boards you put up under Lancia still have to be back behind hand traps because oftentimes they were broken easily by stronger engines like the Mitsurugi. I also noticed that anytime Lancia was paired with another hand trap like Fualos, for example, it meant that the deck really struggled and you basically had to rely heavily on the rest of your hand being powerful non-engine to stop your opponent. So between those two reasons, I decided to instead pivot my focus towards Mitsurugi. Now, there are a couple of Mitsurugi variants that are the most popular. Mitsurugi Yugioh is a variant that has won the most amount of premier events since its release. The deck is extremely powerful because X Yugioh just does so much on his own. You're able to send a copy of Meteorologic Aggregator or Eclipse Twins, which triggers in the graveyard, and on top of that, you get to search for another Yugioh monster, which technically means that it's a +2 on his own because you're taking away a card from your opponent with Aggregator and then adding another card to your hand. With the Yugioh monsters, you can also set up Detonator, which is an extremely powerful card, especially against some of the rogue options out there, because if Detonator sticks and they have no answer, it's popping up to 3 cards. Now, previously, a lot of players would end on the full Yugioh Mitsurugi end board, which includes Yugioh Cross, but nowadays, a lot of players have started cutting Cross and Node because they're just bricks. The cards don't do anything on their own, which means that your hand has to be good going first to play while you draw them, and going second, they're just not helping you win. But the one thing that dissuaded me from playing Yugioh Mitsurugi is the fact that the Yugioh monsters are extremely weak to the top 3 hand traps, that being Molcharmi Fualos, Molcharmi Perulia, and Drone Lockbird. Normal summoning an Ice Yugioh into a Fualos guarantees that your opponent's drawing at least 2 cards because you summon out from deck to resolve the effect of Ice, and then you end off in a Detonator or a Baguska. Obviously, this is not very good, and you're in a really awkward spot where you're not able to take advantage of Habakiri in your hand because that would give your opponent additional draws. On the other hand, under Perulia and Drone Lockbird, most of the time you're just going Detonator pass, which I mean a lot of times isn't the end of the world, but I'm wondering if there's any way to do better. So I had to weigh the options. Obviously, the Mitsurugi Yugioh deck has a lot higher ceiling, a lot more powerful end boards, and is overall a lot stronger when your opponent does not have any of the Charmies or Droll. But when they do, it makes the cards a lot worse, which is why I started looking at the pure Mitsurugi deck. This is a deck that a lot of top players have been eyeing because it does the Mitsurugi shenanigans really consistently and allows you to play more non-engine. Because the Yugioh package is so thick, it basically means that you can only play 14 or 15 non-engine, but in a dedicated pure Mitsurugi build, you can play as high as 17. But the biggest thing that I liked about this deck is the fact that you can play into Molcharmis extremely effectively, oftentimes giving them only one single draw off of either Perulia or Fualos if you sequence your cards properly. But that just left the Droll situation. This is one of the strongest cards against Mitsurugi strategy because it shuts off all of their searching, meaning not only are you unable to search from your deck, but you're not able to trigger the effects in the graveyard of the big ritual monsters to search and special summon themselves. But luckily, there is one way to beat Droll, and that's by taking advantage of the Fiendsmith monsters. With Moon of the Close Sky being a generic Link 2, and a deck like Mitsurugi spamming a bunch of bodies onto the board, you can easily bridge into Moon into Requiem and summon out Lacrima, dumping the Fiendsmith Engraver, and guaranteeing that you end on either Fiendsmith Desiree with the ability to negate card effects on the field, or a DDD High Wave King Caesar, who's extremely powerful this format because you can negate all of the Malice monster effects to special summon themselves, as well as all of the Mitsurugi cards, including Mitsurugi Ritual and Mitsurugi Prayers. By going for Caesar, you also leave Lacrima and Requiem in the graveyard, so you're able to dump Fiendsmith in Paradise as an additional disruption during your opponent's turn. All of this means that at the very minimum, you're still able to set up a board of High Wave King Caesar plus Lacrima in the graveyard with a Mirakumo on the board and 4 other cards in your hand, all thanks to the effect of one lone Habakiri. But if you have other extenders in your hand, you can also end an IP Masquerena and a combination of Mitsurugi Prayers, Magatama, or Purification, which is really strong considering the opponent is going to start their turn with 5 cards in hand. Instead of the Raizio monsters, we could also play Manju of 10,000 Hands. This is an old school Yu-Gi-Oh card that has always been really powerful in ritual-based decks like Necroz in 2013. Upon normal summon, you can search your deck for any ritual spell or ritual monster, meaning not only does he bridge into Habakiri, but he also can search for a copy of Mitsurugi Ritual. And with this being your first action, if your opponent drops Drone Lockbird on the resolution, we're still able to activate Mitsurugi Ritual and summon out the other ritual monster in our hand. In most cases, if this is Habakiri, we can dump a copy of Kusanagi and Night Sword Serpent, bringing back the Serpent as a free extender body, and returning Mitsurugi Ritual back to our hand. From there, we can use the Manju as a body, plus the Night Sword Serpent to link off into our Fiendsmith combo, ending off in a High Wave King Caesar with Lacrima in the graveyard for follow-up. We can then activate the copy of Mitsurugi Ritual to summon from deck, tributing the onboard Habakiri to summon out Mirakumo, which gives us up to 4 points of disruption if you count the trap card. So technically, Manju is one of the best ways to play around Drone Lockbird because he's an extender body that can be used for link climbing, but also searching the missing piece of our puzzle. I also did some cooking in the kitchen and found out that you could play Diviner of the Herald. This is a card that lets you Foolish Burial a fairy monster from your deck or your extra deck when she's normal summoned. And by sending Herald of the Arc Light, you can still search for Habakiri or the ritual spell just like you would with Manju. But Diviner can also send Elder Entity Entis, allowing you to pop a card your opponent controls, which gives it some dual utility and can be really useful under Droll. The difference with Diviner is she also becomes a level 6 after resolving her effect, meaning you lose access to the powerful rank 4 toolbox, but instead you can make a light and dark Chaos Angel really easy if you control another level 4 Mitsurugi monster. Diviner also is unique because when she's tributed, you can special summon a level 2 or lower fairy monster from your deck. And after combing through the list of search targets, there weren't that many good fairies, but one that caught my attention was Consecrated Light. This is a floodgate monster that prevents both players from special summoning dark monsters or declaring an attack with them. And unlike Mitsurugi Ritual, it turns out Habakiri can actually tribute any monster, not just a reptile. So if your hand is strong enough, you can technically leave Diviner on the field and then tribute it with Habakiri at the end of your combo after you control an array of dark monsters including Mirakumo, then special summon out Consecrated Light and lock out your opponent from playing the game. It's also very handy under Drone Lockbird or if you have to tribute the Diviner early. If we get hit by Droll after searching Habakiri off of Diviner, we can simply reveal it to special summon out a body and then tribute the Diviner. From there, we can bridge off into Moon of the Closed Heaven because she's a light monster and not dark. Whereas if you only had Manju and you searched Habakiri, a Droll Knockbird would effectively end your turn. But Diviner summoning a free body off of Habakiri is actually kind of nice. There was also another level 1 pendulum monster called Poisonnaire de Nouvelle. This card searches for any level 1 ritual monster, and we got a TCG exclusive called Miracle Raven. Yes, it's a raven off of Pre-Preparation of Rites that can be searched off of Poisonnaire. And Miracle Raven is the first pendulum ritual monster that can special summon itself out for free. So a standard combo involves normal summoning Diviner, searching Habakiri, special out Saji and tribute Diviner, and search Mitsurugi Ritual and a copy of Poisonnaire. Poisonnaire then adds Miracle Raven, which scales itself to perform a ritual summon, tributing away the Poisonnaire. But Poisonnaire actually has another effect as a pendulum scale. It can special summon itself out as an additional extender, which instantly gives you 3 bodies off of just one single Diviner. And it also unlocks a plethora of rank 1 Xyz monsters, including Fucho if you want to survive for a turn for whatever reason. And yeah, after having cooked for a whole day, I was pretty proud of what I discovered. But in practice, I wasn't sure how good this was because you do have to play a lot of fluff in your main deck. And honestly, some of the rank 4 Xyz are really busted. Gallic Granite can search for Nibiru, Baguska is good against a lot of rogue decks, and sometimes when you get hand trapped awkwardly, you really need that King of the Pharaoh Imps. So for now, I'll stick with Manju, but if you guys have some more time, maybe you can innovate a little more with Diviner of the Herald. I should also mention the Orchist engine, because all of these monsters are really powerful with Mitsurugi. Off of one lone Orchist monster, you can now bridge off into King of the Pharaoh Imps with 2 level 4 bodies to go off into the Mitsurugi shenanigans. On the other hand, if you have 2 Mitsurugi level 8s, you can overlay into Dingirsu and branch off into your Orchist links. And best of all, they're all dark monsters, so you can integrate Dominus Impulse quite easily. But I think by now you guys already know that I hate cards that don't really do as much going second, and when you have a deck full of them like the Orcus monsters, I don't think I want to open multiple Gursus or Harp Horrors or any combination of the other cards, but it's kind of interesting you can discard them off of opposing Mirakumo activations, which on the flip side makes me think if I'm playing against Orcus, maybe I'm not going to activate Mirakumo so they can't discard any extenders. I think I'm leaning a little heavier towards Pure Mitsurugi, even though playing light monsters like the Fiendsmith and Manjus means that I can't integrate Dominus Impulse into the main deck. But maybe there's a way to side deck Dominus Impulse because I can take out the Manjus and the Fiendsmith going second, especially since Manju's predominantly there to go first and beat Droll. This was a long day of brainstorming and studying the metagame, so I decided to unwind a bit and walked about 10 minutes to the beach where they were having a free symphony orchestra. And yeah, there were a lot of people. I was a little claustrophobic, but it was nice because they were playing some classics as well as some film scores including Harry Potter and Star Wars. The next day, I went online to check out the results from the Oceanics and the Central America WCQ. Malice won the Central America WCQ, while Heraldic Ryzio somehow won the Oceanics. This was a bit of a surprise to me. There was also some other pure Ryzio decks that made top cut, incorporating the Dododo Warrior engine just like we discussed in the previous video. But the one thing is that they actually played a different format in the Oceanics because the Brothers of Legend expansion is not currently legal in the European regions. Yeah, they somehow had a production issue where this product was delayed, and it won't be out until August. So that means no Orcust Mitsurugi variants or Gem Knights. But more interesting was the fact that only one single Vanquish Soul topped, and no Lunalights topped either event to my knowledge. But I think we're seeing a recurring trend where Yu-Gi-Oh formats just evolve into the most toxic cards possible near the end of the formats. A lot of Harpies Featherstorm sided, and basically every Malice was siding copies of Mistaken Arrest, which is like an FTK against Mitsurugi and a lot of Ryzio variants. It's a little scary to think how well Malice is positioned right now, because the deck doesn't lose to Drone Lockbird in Game 1, and only really has to deal with Lancia in Game 2 and Game 3. But if you win Game 1 with Malice, you have 2 more games to deal with Lancia if your opponent even drew it. And if you go first and they Lancia you can still blow them out with Mistaken Arrest. So at this point, I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do, but I guess I'll take some time to brainstorm a little more. I spend the rest of my days just looking through deck profiles online, and YouTube's auto-dubbing feature is really useful for watching these deck profiles in different languages. So you can get like basically every nuance and the points that the players bring up. With all of that aside, I spent the next couple of days practicing on DB, especially since the set was now legal and rated. But playing on DB isn't always optimal because I found myself constantly getting distracted and doing other things during the game. So I decided I had to up the stakes just a little bit. I ventured into the dark depths of Discord to find myself at one of the most depraved channels of all time, the Coliseum. A Discord channel run by the DB Grinder that has a lot of degenerates participating in illegal gambling, aka money matches. And I figured I'd start with a clean slate, so I decided to create a brand new account. What should we call ourselves? Dramaman 9000. Yeah, that works. And thus Dramaman 9000 was born. Now, personally, I'm not huge on gambling. It always hurts when you lose money, but it also kind of hurts me a little bit when I know I'm taking someone else's money. So I started advertising friendly money match challenges for $2. And of course, I was promptly laughed at. So I upped the stake to $5 and was still laughed at. It looked like $20 was a minimum, so you know what? I have no choice. I'm just gonna have to go ahead. We quickly found a challenger and queued in. I sent $20 cash to a middleman using Zelle, and my opponent did the same. Game 1 started right away, and I won the die roll surprisingly. So I draw my 5-card hand and discover one of the worst opening hands in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Saji, Nightsword Serpent, and 3 hand traps. Well, let's start by normal summoning Saji. We're gonna add a copy of Prayers, get hit by a Drone Lockbird, which in this case, you know, it isn't too bad. We're gonna chain it and then add a copy of Kusanagi by discarding the Serpent so we can special summon him out as an extender, add back the Prayers, and now we have an option. We can go into Baguska or into the Fiendsmith play. I decided to go for Moon into the Fiendsmith because it gives us some follow-up, as well as the potential to make a Caesar. So we'll go ahead and summon out Lacrima, dump a copy of Engraver, and then bring back the Requiem first in that order in case our opponent Bystios us. Bring out the Necroquip Princess and summon back the Engraver onto our side of the table by shuffling back the Moon. From here, we are hit by Nibiru, the Primal Being, and we have no choice but to set our Prayers for follow-up and the copy of Imperm. Our opponent normal summons Chessy Cat, using the effect. Oh, no, wait, nope. Well, apparently we're not using the effect just yet. Yeah, we're gonna set the trap first because we forgot about it. We'll hit it with Ash, and then he'll go off into Lingaribo, activate the field spell, bring out the Dormouse. Now, this is a really bad spot because we're pinned down by the Lingaribo being able to negate our infinite permanence, so the Dormouse will resolve, and then comes out the rest of the Malice shenanigans. Drone Lockbird obviously does nothing, so we are looking at a game 2 pretty swift, but we'll wait a little bit before scooping just to see if we can garner any more information from our opponent. They're gonna go off into the Access Code play and then start wreaking havoc on our board, dealing well over 8,000 damage after bringing back the White Binder by banishing it for Access Code's effect. We'll try and imperm the Access Code, but Lingaribo will take care of that, and that's all she wrote. Going off to game 2, we're gonna start and draw our 5-card hand. Hopefully it's a little better this time, and it is literally the exact same same hand. Yeah, okay, I don't think we're cut out for money matches. Let's go ahead and activate Fiendsmith's Tank. Please don't have the Fuulos. He has a Fuulos. We'll hit him with the talents, and here's where I kind of misplay. So I use the effect to look at the hand, but in reality, we probably could have argued drawing cards, because there were a lot of answers here. Literally drawing any of the ritual monsters would have let us search for a ritual spell off of Saji and still put up somewhat of a board, and there's also a chance we could have drawn into another Solemn Warning or even Lancia, which would be even more formidable. But my mentality here was maybe I could rip his hand for a starter/extender and then set up either a Baguska or a Requiem into follow-up plus Fiendsmith Trap. But yeah, that was literally a mistake because our opponent has Imperm plus Druid Worm, both of which are pretty disruptive against what we have. So from here, we're gonna have the normal Saji and add a copy of Prayers and deal with what we got. We'll activate Prayers, tributing the copy of Kusanagi. Our opponent gives us the thumbs up, but then he decides to think and Bistio Druisworms. Druisworm comes down on the table. We'll resolve it by adding Aramasa, bring out the Aramasa, but of course we're still under Fualos, which means that we cannot put up much of a board, and searching Habakiri is really just a useless card here. So I decided to go off into Requiem. This way at least we can go for Lacrima and dump a copy of Trap, and we have Solemn Warning. So assuming our opponent draws into a Malice monster, we have the Solemn Warning for the normal summon, and then we have the copy of the Fiendsmith Trap to deal with the Malice in Underground. But the issue is our opponent drew a Bistio, which is probably the best card they could have drawn in this scenario. They activate the field spell and we chain Requiem, bringing out our copy of Lacrima to dump the trap. So the thought process here is they bring out whatever they banish, and then we use a trap in the Desiree to deal with that monster, and then we have the Solemn Warning for their normal summon. But of course this adds a layer of complexity to the situation because we know they have the set MTP. They can chain the MTP to add either a normal summon or an extender like March Hare. If they added March Hare, it would mean that they already had a normal summon, which means we lose regardless because we only have the warning to deal with both the normal and the March Hare. But if they drew non-engine, then we can still use the Solemn Warning to deal with the normal summon, which means that they're stuck with just a Druid's Worm on the table, so we have another turn. So we'll go ahead and use Paradise, but they chain the freshly drawn Baldrake, which now targets the only Light Fiend monster in the graveyard. So we have no choice here but to Solemn Warning the Baldrake, so everything resolves as planned, but they can obviously chain the MTP and add a copy of Dormouse, which can now be normal summon, and that's basically the end of the game. God damn. But in hindsight, we played that really hideously. If we had used talents to draw on 2, we'd be in a much better spot, but that's the thing you have to figure out in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Not all of the hands will be sunshines and rainbows, and a lot of times you're going to be dealing with bricks or suboptimal hands that you might not be used to that you have to think on the fly to figure out, especially when you're under Droll or the Charmies, which sets up a mini game that you have to play through. So yeah, with that we just donated $20 to someone who swiftly 2-0'd us. I don't think we're going to be playing a money match until we figure out how the deck works. But honestly, I think I learned a lot from that match, and with only a mere couple of days before the deck lists are due for the WCQ, I need to take full advantage of the little time I have left and dive into testing.